Nolwazi had poured her heart into planning the perfect celebration. 10 years of marriage deserved something special, and she had spared no detail. A luxury lodge in Livingstone, Zambia. Golden lights twinkling under the trees. A candlelit dinner beside the Zambezi River. Everything was set, romantic, elegant, unforgettable. Friends and family had flown in. Laughter echoed. The air was thick with love. Or so she thought. She stood at the entrance, heart-pounding, eyes on the door. Thabiso was running a little late, but that only made her more excited. Maybe he was getting flowers. Maybe he had a surprise gift. Nolwazi smiled to herself, adjusting the satin folds of her dress, the same one he had once said made her look like a dream. And then the door opened. Everyone turned. Thabiso walked in, but he wasn't alone. His hand wasn't holding roses. It was holding another woman's hand. Nolwazi's breath caught in her throat. The music seemed to fade. Time slowed. The woman beside him was tall, glowing, and smiling like she belonged. Thabiso didn't look ashamed. He didn't even look nervous. He smiled too, like this was normal. For a second, Nolwazi thought she might faint. 10 years. 10 years of love, of sacrifices, of building a life. And this was how he arrived. On their anniversary, people began whispering. Someone dropped a fork. Nolwazi blinked, forcing herself not to cry, not to scream. The pain hit her chest like a punch, but she stood still. Tall. Silent. Shattered. The moment Thabiso walked in with another woman, the whole room froze. You could feel the shock in the air, like someone had pulled the plug on the music and the mood at the same time. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Glasses paused halfway to lips. Eyes widened. No one knew what to say or where to look. But Thabiso? He walked in like it was the most normal thing in the world. Like he hadn't just humiliated his wife on their 10th anniversary in front of everyone they knew. He smiled. And then, as if that wasn't enough, he turned to the woman beside him and said, "Everyone meet Zanele." Zanele. She smiled too, confident, comfortable, bold. Like she'd been invited. Like she owned the room. Like she was the wife. But what broke Nolwazi even more wasn't just the fact that Thabiso brought another woman. It was what Zanele was wearing. It was her dress. The exact same dress Nolwazi had picked out weeks ago at a boutique in Lusaka. A silky rose-gold gown she had fallen in love with the moment she saw it. She had imagined walking into the celebration with it, looking stunning, making Thabiso's heart skip. She never got the chance. Now here it was. On another woman. Her dress. Her dream. Her moment stolen. Nolwazi stood there in silence, watching it all unfold like a bad movie. Her heart felt like it was crumbling inside her chest, but she kept her chin up. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. But deep down something cracked. And as Zanele laughed softly at something Thabiso whispered to her, Nolwazi realized. This wasn't just disrespect. It was war. The room felt like it had stopped breathing. After Thabiso introduced Zanele, no one moved. No one spoke. Friends, family, business partners, everyone just stood there, frozen. Some people lowered their eyes, pretending to be busy with their drinks. Others looked away completely, as if avoiding the truth might erase it. A few guests whispered quietly behind their hands. The silence was loud, awkward, and full of tension. Nolwazi stood at the center of it all, as if under a spotlight. But this wasn't the kind of attention she had imagined when she planned the celebration. This wasn't admiration. It was pity, confusion, shock. She could feel the humiliation creeping up her spine, wrapping around her like a cold blanket. It was like being slowly undressed in public, layer by painful layer. And yet somehow she didn't cry. Her eyes burned, but no tears came. She refused to let them fall. Not tonight, not in front of these people. A cousin shifted uncomfortably and cleared his throat. One of Thabiso's business partners pretended to check something on his phone. An old friend of Nolwazi's tried to give her a sympathetic look. But even that felt like a dagger. No one really knew what to say. No one expected this. This was supposed to be a celebration of love, of loyalty, of 10 years together. Instead, it had turned into a cruel public show, like watching a beautiful painting get ripped in half. Nolwazi's hands were shaking, but she kept them at her sides. Her heart was breaking, but her face stayed calm. Because somewhere inside the storm, a small voice whispered, "Don't fall apart now." Not yet. The music played softly in the background, trying and failing to cover the thick, uncomfortable silence that had taken over the room. People were still whispering, still avoiding eye contact with Nolwazi. Some guests looked ready to leave. Others just stood there, unsure of what to do next. But Nolwazi? She took a deep breath, straightened her back, and began walking toward the stage. Each step felt heavy, but her heart had already made the decision. If this night was going to break, then she was going to be the one to break it, with truth, not tears. She reached the microphone, her heels clicking against the wooden floor like thunder in the stillness. The DJ looked up, confused. She gave him a small nod, and the music faded out completely. The room went silent again. All eyes turned to her. Nolwazi looked out at the sea of faces, some stunned, some uncomfortable, some heartbroken for her. And then she spoke. "Good evening," she said, her voice steady, clear. "Thank you all for being here tonight. I know this isn't the celebration anyone expected." People shifted. Thabiso stood stiff beside Zanele, his smile now long gone. "I spent months planning this night," she continued. "I thought it would be a memory my husband and I would share for the rest of our lives. Turns out I was right. Just not in the way I imagined." A few quiet gasps filled the room. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She just spoke. Calm, graceful, powerful. "Some people show you exactly who they are when they think you'll never leave," she said, locking eyes with Thabiso. "But I believe in showing people who you are when they think you're broken." A pause. And then the first clap came. Then another. And another. By the time she stepped away from the mic, the room wasn't silent anymore. It was full of applause, soft at first, then rising like a wave. That night may have started as heartbreak, but Nolwazi ended it with something stronger. Her power. As the clapping slowly faded, Nolwazi stood tall at the microphone, holding on to the moment like it belonged to her, because it did. The room had shifted. The shame that tried to bury her was now starting to slip away. She looked calm, but her words were sharp, clear, and full of purpose. "I want to thank all of you," she said, scanning the faces in the crowd. "Thank you for coming here tonight. Thank you for showing up, for what was supposed to be a celebration of love." There was a pause. People were listening now, leaning in. "But tonight I've realized something," she said, her voice steady. "This celebration is still about love, just not the kind you think. It's about self-love, about dignity, about walking away when your heart says enough." You could hear a pin drop. "And before I forget," she continued, turning slightly toward the table where Thabiso and Zanele now sat, "I want to thank you too, Zanele." A ripple of shock moved through the room. "Yes," Nolwazi said, nodding. "Thank you for making it so clear what I needed to do. You made this decision much easier." Thabiso's face had gone pale. He looked like he wasn't sure whether to stand up or sink into the floor. "Now for the real surprise," Nolwazi said, reaching into the small clutch bag she had carried with her. Slowly, with complete control, she pulled out a brown envelope. "These," she said, holding it up, "are the divorce papers. Signed. Dated. Ready." Gasps filled the room. One woman even dropped her glass. "I came prepared," Nolwazi said, smiling, not out of pettiness but from pure peace. "Because I knew deep down this night would not be about celebrating a marriage. It would be about ending one." She placed the envelope gently on the table in front of Thabiso. Then she looked him in the eye and said, "Happy anniversary." And just like that, the real speech was over. Not the one about love, but the one about freedom. Long before the anniversary night, Nolwazi already knew something was wrong. Thabiso had changed. The late-night calls he never explained. The coldness in his voice. The distance in his eyes. At first she tried to make excuses, work stress maybe. But her heart knew better. It always does. She didn't confront him. Not yet. Instead she started watching. Quietly. Carefully. She noticed how he started hiding his phone. How he traveled more but came back with fewer stories. He wasn't just distracted, he was gone. Even when he was right beside her. So Nolwazi made a choice. If her marriage was going to fall apart, it wouldn't take her down with it. She started planning silently, smartly. No drama. No tears. Just strategy. She contacted a lawyer. Used a fake name for the first few meetings. She got advice. She made a plan. She sold her shares in Thabiso's company without him noticing, transferring the money into a private account in her name only. She didn't want revenge. She wanted a clean break. Then she did something bold. She bought a house in Kampala, a beautiful place with big windows, sunshine in every room, and not a single memory of Thabiso. She furnished it slowly, sending the pieces one by one. A quiet future was being built behind the scenes. And the anniversary party? That was never just a celebration. It was her final act. Her graceful exit. Her way of saying goodbye without begging, crying, or explaining. Every flower she chose, every guest she invited. It all had meaning. It was the perfect cover. Everyone thought she was holding the marriage together. But really she was setting herself free. So when Thabiso walked in with another woman, Nolwazi didn't break. Because she had already left him months ago. That party wasn't the beginning of her pain. It was the beginning of her freedom. After Nolwazi's powerful speech and the silence that followed, no one really knew what to expect next. Some people thought the party would end right there. Others whispered about quietly slipping out. But Nolwazi had one more surprise waiting, and it was sweeter than anyone imagined. Just as the tension in the room began to settle, the waiter appeared, rolling out the cake on a silver cart. Everyone turned to look. It was huge and beautiful, 3 layers, decorated in soft white frosting with gold details, just like the party theme. For a second it almost felt like things were normal again. But then people leaned in and saw the message written across the cake in bold red icing. It didn't say "Happy 10th anniversary." It said, "Freedom tastes better." There was a pause, just a beat, and then the room exploded. Gasps, laughter, shocked claps. A few people dropped their drinks. One woman covered her mouth, trying not to laugh too loudly. Even the waiter blinked twice like he had just read it for the first time. Nolwazi stood calmly beside the cake, smiling. Not a petty smile. Not a cruel one. Just peaceful. She wasn't trying to humiliate anyone. She was simply telling the truth, in frosting and flair. Thabiso looked stunned. Zanele shifted in her seat, clearly uncomfortable now. Whatever pride they walked in with had melted faster than the candles on that cake. Guests rushed to take photos. Some even filmed the moment. It was bold. It was savage. It was unforgettable. But more than anything, it was freeing. That cake wasn't just dessert. It was a statement. A final word. A sweet bite of independence that everyone could taste. And yes, everyone remembered it. As the cake was being cut and guests were still buzzing from the shock, Zanele started to panic. Her confidence, the smile she walked in with, it was gone. She could feel the stares, hear the whispers. She knew the energy in the room had completely shifted, and none of it was in her favor. She leaned over and said something to Thabiso, then tried to slip away quietly. Maybe she thought no one would notice. But someone already had their phone out. In fact, a guest had been live-streaming the whole thing from the moment Nolwazi grabbed the mic. What started as a beautiful anniversary celebration had turned into something bigger, much bigger. Zanele's attempt to disappear only made things worse. The camera caught her walking toward the exit, trying to avoid eye contact, her heels clicking fast against the floor. But the internet doesn't miss a thing. Within an hour, the live video had been reposted, clipped, shared, and captioned. Anniversary turns into divorce gala. Zanele in stolen dress exits stage left face with tears of joy. Freedom tastes better. And we have receipts. By the time morning came, the video had crossed 500,000 views on African TikTok. Comments poured in from Nairobi, Lagos, Johannesburg, Accra. People couldn't get enough. Memes were made. Reaction videos were everywhere. Nolwazi's calm speech, the cake message, and Zanele's awkward exit. It was internet gold. And while Thabiso sat stiffly at the table, trying to save face, the story was already out of his hands. The world had taken it and run. Zanele may have tried to run from the room, but she couldn't run from the cameras, or the internet, or the truth. What Nolwazi didn't say with anger. The world shouted for her with hashtags. After the cake was served and the whispers turned into viral videos, Nolwazi didn't stick around for long. She had said what she came to say. She had nothing left to prove. With her head high and her dignity untouched, she left the party, calm, powerful, and done. But what no one knew, not even Thabiso, was that Nolwazi wasn't just walking away from a marriage. She was walking away with his company too. Years ago, when they first started the logistics business, Thabiso had registered everything under his name, at least that's what he thought. But behind the scenes, Nolwazi had invested her own money, made her own moves, and quietly became a legal co-owner. She never asked for attention. She didn't want credit. She just believed in building together. But when the love started fading, she began to protect herself. Quietly. Carefully. Over the past few months, while Thabiso was busy living a double life, Nolwazi was meeting with lawyers, going through contracts, and preparing to move the business shares into her name. She waited for the right moment. And the morning after the anniversary party, that moment came. She filed the final set of papers. With one signature, her shares were officially separated from his. Her name was on the documents. Her account held the assets. And just like that, Thabiso lost control of the empire he thought he owned alone. It wasn't revenge. It was justice. For the years she supported him. For the ideas he took credit for. For the love he betrayed. Nolwazi didn't just leave the party with her pride. She left with the power she had always helped build, but was never given credit for. And Thabiso? He woke up not just embarrassed but broke. His empire had a new boss. Her name was still Nolwazi. But this time she wasn't standing behind anyone. 1 year later, Nolwazi was standing on a different kind of stage, this time in Accra, Ghana. But she wasn't heartbroken anymore. She wasn't crying in silence or hiding in shame. She was glowing, confident, free. She had become a keynote speaker, invited to women empowerment events across Africa. And every time she stepped up to the mic, women leaned in to listen. She told her story with honesty, grace, and a little bit of fire. The betrayal, the speech, the cake, the exit. She didn't tell it for pity, she told it for power. Her book, Anniversary Exit, hit the shelves and went viral within weeks. It was raw, bold, and full of lessons. Women from Nairobi to Lagos shared quotes from it on their social media. Book clubs discussed it. Podcasts invited her. Everyone wanted to hear from the woman who turned heartbreak into a masterclass in strength. And what about Thabiso? He was still recovering. His business reputation took a hit after the truth came out. Some clients left. Some partners pulled out. His ego, even more bruised. Zanele disappeared not long after the party, deleting her social media and vanishing from public view. But Nolwazi? She was everywhere. Magazines called her a silent storm. Young girls looked up to her. Women found courage through her story. She didn't just survive the worst night of her life. She turned it into her beginning.